the dot, and I'm going to call this meeting of Judiciary and Public Safety to order. All righty. The first item is item number 2 on the agenda. Consideration of minutes of October 3rd, 2022.
I move to approve those minutes.
Second. Second, any discussion? No? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, that passes. All right, we are just moving down here. Okay, closing item 2, opening item 3. I really don't have too much for comments, generally speaking. Just a reminder how we've split out the public comments. So the first section will be public comments on the agenda items only. And the reason why we do that is to make sure that we're focused on the agenda item for today and have timely feedback in that way. There is an opportunity towards the end of the meeting where we'll have general comments under the jurisdiction of JPS. So that's just a reminder. So with that, we're going to close item 3 and move to item 4, public comments on agenda items. Yes, please. State your name.
Chairman, Tom Egan, 3017 State Road 116. I represent District 33 of Winnebago County. I'm here tonight to talk on a couple of subjects. One of them is number 7 on the consideration of vote possible resolution on Rule 18. We've been doing this now for, what, 2 months? And the only ones I actually heard from is Land and Water, that they might be going to have a problem with it. I haven't heard from any of the other ones. Health, which I know was a consideration. I haven't heard any problem from any of them. Neither. It's up to you guys, whatever you want to do, but I do not believe that there has been any bad problems with any of this as of now anyways. The other one I want to talk to a little bit is about the prayer. I don't know exactly what your plans are on that, but hopefully whatever you are, you're thinking about just the prayer and not because of something that happened that somewhere people want to get rid of the person that's saying the prayer. That is my true hopes, that we remember that we're doing it by the spot and not by a person. Just like on what we did on some of the things that was done this last week, we had a vote on the position and not on the person, because a lot of things could have been different at that time. So on the prayer, I definitely think that it should remain, and it'll, as of right now, it is up to me and whether that person or whatever, but it always has been the chairman that's appointed the person to go ahead and say it. It's been a county board member for as long as I can remember. I went back, Mr. Eisen can probably remember longer than I can back. I know he can, but it always has been someone from the board that has said the prayer. And it's rotated when one couldn't do it anymore, then someone else has just picked up and gone with it. So them are the two. Very much be more than happy to answer questions, or if you'd let me maybe later on when you would speak and there's some questions, I'm very pleased to also.
Yeah, let's speak to that once we get to the
Okay.
topic area.
Okay, that's all I have at this time.
Great. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Limited if it's well, limited, because I don't want to get into a discussion of a specific agenda item until we get to that point. For both of those.
Okay, then stop me if we need to postpone.
Okay.
I think I'm aware, but what is the concern that was brought up on Land and Water?
Land and Water, right now, the federal government and them are saying that one of the voting members that is part of the Land and Water or from Land and Water, and time down the road, they might not let them vote anymore. And of course, it's mainly farmers on there. And so during time that they're taking off crops and things like that, there might not always be. And I said, well, that's where I come in. You just have to let me know. And the chairman can come in and fill in for anyone. And the chairman can't, and the vice chairman can. Well, the vice chairman is chairman of that committee. So so I just said, you'd have to let me know. He said, well, lots of times I don't know. They're not going to come until, you know, if they're doing silage or picking corn or whatever, they just might not even bother calling in. So I said, well, if nothing else works out and this remains the way that it is, I said, I will just come to your meetings And if you don't need me, I'll leave or stick around. Lots of meetings I go to and I'll just stick around anyways. I feel that's part of my job, hearing how things are going on.
Thank you. And there's going to be some other conversation around that agenda item as well.
Okay.
We'll have to talk to you. Great,
Thank
thank you. Hey, any other public comments on the agenda items for this evening? Okay, all right, we're going to close item number 4. And then moving to item number 5, communications shared by committee members. Anyone have something they want to talk about?
Nothing on my end.
Quiet group tonight?
I just got one thing. On the 15th, it is county government night at the Herd game over at the Oshkosh Arena. So if people want to go there, I know that the county executive sent out an email with a link to the tickets a couple months ago. So if people are interested, want to go to a basketball game, that's an opportunity. That's all.
Great, thanks. I think we're all kind of still tired for the budget session. I think everyone in this room is pretty much tired for the budget. Yeah.
Oh, your board meeting.
Oh, the 15th? Okay, well then I won't be there.
Oh.
Yeah. That will be at the Herd game.
You would excuse and just go over there.
No.
There you go.
Be good.
Right, you know what, and actually on that note, I was gonna mention this, but I'll just say it now, the communications piece. So we moved our meetings, JPS meetings, right, to the first Monday of every month. So then whatever we decide or whatever can go to the next board meeting. However, that's not gonna happen this month because the next board meeting is next week, Tuesday. So we've missed the deadline. So anything that we discussed tonight actually will not be forwarded to the board until the December 20th. I think it's the 20th, right? So just as an FYI, just how the calendars went, and the first being Tuesday, it just kind of threw everything off. Okay. All righty, so that's it for item number 5. We're closing that. We're going to open item number 6, consideration vote budget transfer for $3,200. Coroner's office ship. Hello.
I am just looking to do a budget transfer to transfer $3,200 from my automobile allowance to motor fuel. With the addition of another county vehicle, the cost is going towards fueling the vehicle versus employees turning in mileage.
I will make a motion to make the budget transfer of $3,200.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes. Great, thank you. Okay, that closes item number, oh, yes. Do you want me to do this right away?
We can do it. I can pick it up when we're done. I just wanted to.
Okay, why don't I introduce 7, because you don't have to stay for the whole thing. So let me just sign. Unless you want me to.
Hear the sheriff's report, so I'll be around.
Oh, okay,
So.
okay. Oh, what are we doing? Thank you. Okay, item number 7, consideration vote, resolution, create rule 18.8 of Winnebago County Board of Supervisors to permit a standing committee or citizen-involved commission, board, or committee to vote remotely on a limited basis, except for any meeting involving the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors, for example, organizational, business, budget, special orders. 2 points on this. It's somewhat of a moot issue for this specific resolution. So a little history on this. This was introduced originally, I believe, by Supervisors Norton and Barry, right? And it went through JPS. We did not vote for it. It went to the board, and it did not pass. And there were, for me, there were a few comments that were made at the board that made me reevaluate my position. And there was, you know, in everything that I do, I always step back and ask, what is the best for the county? And had a couple of follow-up conversations with Supervisor Barry on this, and felt like it was worthwhile bringing up again, but having some, we'll say, balance to it versus the old one, which was, you know, it was required of everyone, regardless if it worked or not for the specific committee, board, or commission. So I went back to Robert's Rules. Robert's Rules did issue a new edition in 2020, edition 12. And in that edition, they actually speak to quite a bit on rules pertaining to remote meetings and things of that nature. So I looked at what Robert said and also had a follow-up conversation during WCA with a few people, including Jay Curtis, and decided that it makes sense to bring this forward in a little balanced way. However, I gave this to Corporation Counsel and asked their opinion or her opinion. And the opinion that I got back, and you please stop me if I'm wrong, was it's too close to the old one. And we are not able to bring action forward to the board with a resolution that's too close to a resolution that fails, with one caveat. And the caveat is that if someone voted against a resolution, they could petition to bring it back up. Right, but there is a time frame on that, and it has to happen at the next meeting. Now, unfortunately, we had, I think, a business meeting kind of in there. And so this wouldn't be the next meeting. So at this point, I don't know if there's much we can do with this specific action.
May I just add here? Chairman Stafford and I had spoken about this, and it is basically allowing remote voting. And as Chairman Stafford indicated, Supervisors Norton and Fari brought this to the board in September, and it failed. Now, the county board rules, specifically 12.5, states if an amendment or substitute is lost, another substantially the same shall not be entertained. And then 12.7 of the county board rules says when a motion or a question has once been determined, any member with the prevailing side, if he or she was present and voted, may move for reconsideration of the vote, but such motion shall be made and acted upon at the same or next succeeding adjourned business meeting. And as Chairman Stafford indicated, since this resolution failed in September and there was an intervening meeting with the county board in October, it is untimely. The question was, is the proposed resolution that was submitted substantially the same as what was originally presented by Supervisors Norton and Fari? And Supervisor Stafford and I have regular meetings, and I said, you know, I think this is substantially the same.
I thought it wasn't.
Right, we both had. So I said, I would be happy to reach out to colleagues to see if they had the same opinion I did. And I know The committee values atollees. And I reached out to Andy Phillips, and he was of the same opinion that I was, that it was substantially the same. So based on that, and again, I would also point 39.6 of Robert's rules states motions are improper when they present practically the same question as a motion previously debated. So in addition to our rules and Roberts, my recommendation to Supervisor Stafford was that this was not properly, this should not be entertained.
Right, so we had that conversation after the agenda had been published, but we kind of knew that this was going to be a possibility.
Yes.
And I elected to keep it on, just on the, the chance that we got feedback saying, no, this is something we can consider at committee. But nonetheless, I wanted to keep it on so at least we had the conversation, and we can see kind of the progression that we took in considering this specific resolution. That I did try to bring an improvement forward. It just feels at this point that it's a little too late, and at some point, maybe down the road, we can reevaluate this, but I just think that, yes.
Is this a rule that cannot be suspended?
This rule can be suspended. Oh,
You can
right.
suspend the rule and go back and do it if you really have a desire to accomplish that.
right. So I need to think about that. So I'm going to pull it off of our consideration for tonight,
Right.
but thank you. Yes.
Let me just make sure that I don't believe that it's prevented from being suspended. Suspension of the rules may be suspended for 12. This is 18A. No, it doesn't reference 18A.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Yes.
I don't remember the exact phrase. What is the reason, or this is okay, I acknowledge that this is too soon. What is not too soon? Are we saying 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, that session?
Is the term?
What defines the term in essence?
And we're actually having a discussion about the definition of session.
Right. Yeah, that's happening.
Right. Right. But right now, it would be the following term. Meaning, what, April of 24.
Right. Yeah, the organization.
That's right.
Yes. Okay. All right, so that's going to be pulled into consideration, but I did want to have that conversation so we all hear it and kind of understand what happened with that one. Okay, so we're going to close item 7, the agenda. We're going to move to item 8, which is consideration vote resolution, amend County Board Rule 6.0, order of business to replace 6.1 E, approval and correction of minutes of previous meeting with consent calendar. Supervisor, I love your handouts. Thank you.
May I have one?
That's for the secretary. I'm running out.
No. Oh, look at this.
To recognize me as speaker.
Yes. Supervisor Isaacs.
And you have another. We have been charged by our county board chairman to find a way to reduce the length of county board meetings. And I've been familiar with a concept. Typically, it's been called the consent agenda, but Robert's Rules calls it a consent calendar. And I have distributed a copy of the concept of a consent calendar, which is in the body of the resolution. But it's always helpful if a third party, particularly an institute for local government, promoting good government at the local level, comments and explains a consent calendar. To expedite meetings and reserve time for matters that need to be discussed. Many local agencies have a section on their agendas labeled as the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are generally non-controversial items that do not require much, if any, discussion. The consent calendar allows decision makers to group such items together under one heading and decide them at one time. Local agencies typically have a procedure for removing an item from the consent calendar for separate discussion. This enables the item to be considered and voted upon separately if discussion is needed or if a decision maker needs to not vote on that item because of a disqualifying conflict of interest. Now, in addition to this explanation of it, I have included a agenda from the City of Menasha Common Council. This is for their meeting tonight as we speak. They are meeting. And if we go down to item number F, you can see minutes to receive, but they have all the different departments. But if you go on to item H, okay, it says consent agenda. And it lists minutes to approve. So as we speak, City of Menasha Council is coming to their consent agenda, and they introduce the consent agenda and they ask for a vote. If nobody has asked that an item be taken off of the consent agenda, and here it does explain by the City of Menasha, prior to voting on the consent agenda, items on the consent agenda may be removed at the request of any alderman and placed immediately following action on the consent agenda. The procedures to follow for the consent agenda are A, removal of items from the consent agenda, and B, a motion to approve the items from the consent agenda. So in this case, if I would make an analogy to the county board meeting, we of course have minutes that if you've read the minutes and you have something to correct or you have something to add, you ask to do that. Those minutes being on the consent agenda, if you still want to make a correction or if you want to add something, you can ask that it be taken off the consent agenda and then discussed. And you can see from this item, consent agenda for Menasha, they have a Board of Public Works recommends approval, and they have 4 bills to pay. And so instead of taking the time to introduce each bill, okay, they all go with one vote. Now, that's analogous to the planning and zoning reports that we laboriously go through. If you have 4 reports, you'll have 4 reports and 4 ordinances. So that's 8 votes that we're taking that we could consolidate into one vote. Of course, you have to read of course, anyone would have to read the reports.
I'm sure everyone
beforehand.
does, yeah.
If they wanted to comment, they still would be getting all that information.
Right.
But it would all be consolidated by a vote on the consent agenda. So instead of having 8 votes, you'd have 1 vote. And that's what I'm suggesting that we consider to help alleviate the lengthy board meetings.
So it's like an en bloc,
Huh?
en bloc, kind of where you group things together and then you vote on them in a.
Yeah,
in a group.
yeah, that's what it
So
is.
I think for this discussion, I'm going to open it up to include Corporation Counsel and the chair, since this has a lot of bearing on,
And the deputy clerk is here.
and the deputy clerk. So I want to include all of these individuals in this discussion, but we're going to start with Supervisor Duffy.
Okay. Just a quick question, I guess, for a procedural point of view is, in order to further this discussion, should I actually make a motion and have it seconded so that we can make that discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
because we just want to have it introduced, and then if we feel like it's worth it, we should then formally bring it in.
Okay. I will go ahead and make the motion to, for this resolution to amend County Board Rule 6.0, order of business to replace 6.1 E, approval and correction of minutes of the previous meeting with a consent calendar resolution.
Seconded by Supervisor Blum. Okay, discussion. Yes, Supervisor Jeffrey.
Yeah, so I am familiar with the consent agenda just with other organizations that I've been involved in. And yeah, it is a very easy method to reduce, at least, in this resolution, it says 15 minutes, but there are times where it probably save 20 minutes, 25 minutes. When I was going through this, I immediately thought of the planning and zoning things, because there has been a couple times where we've literally had like a half page worth, sometimes we just have 1 or 2, but then we have a half page worth, and yeah, we have to report, and then we have the actual zoning thing. And so this is a great way for us to be a lot more expeditious with our time. I'm very much in favor of this.
Great.
Well, I would have a question, and this could relate, a good answer could come from Mr. Egan or Supervisor Deputy, who also served on the plan committee, on the zoning, and is that, and maybe we want to check with the planning and zoning department on whether we would be missing some legal necessity to present and legal counsel, whether we're missing some necessity if we don't actually put the name of this property owner in front of the people. What comes to my mind is things like when you have a prisoner who makes a claim that his glasses were broken and wants damages for that loss. That's, to me, that wouldn't be something we want to throw on a consent agenda. It's something we want to let the public know that this is a settled issue so far as the county board is concerned. And the same thing with commendations for people. We just don't want to just kind of breeze through all the commendations without giving them the accolades of their name and their years of service and other things which give them public recognition that people would expect. But if this passes the test of the planning and zoning administrators, then I think that this would be a good thing to go forward with. So perhaps we should keep this in the committee and resolve that question and give this to our corporation counsel and let her dot the i's and cross the t's so that we know we're on good grounds.
So let me ask Corporation Counsel for her opinion
Yes.
and discuss on that point too.
It's interesting what Supervisor Eisen said, because I think consent agendas or calendars would be of assistance. But when I was looking at what could be included, I was thinking of commendations, of disallowance of claims. Though again, it would take someone's, applause away, and you obviously have to decide that. I was concerned about the zoning piece. And I reached out to planning and zoning, and basically we're talking about two types of zoning. There's town zoning and there's shoreland protection, county zoning. And they were explaining to me, and mind you, this was, I think, what Supervisor Eisen said about having more time might be of assistance. But they were explaining to me with town zoning, essentially the towns are asking the county board to bless what they have done. But before it gets to county board, the planning and zoning department has to verify that the towns and villages followed their process. In other words, whatever the process is, the municipal or town or village ordinances. And once the zoning administrator and planning department says, yes, due process has been followed, then it goes to county board. County zoning, the shoreland protection, again, is different because obviously it has a broader reach. The concern I had when I was thinking of these rezonings was the fact that rezonings involve public hearings. And I was concerned if you, especially, well, if there was a protest petition filed, it would not be appropriate, I believe, to have a rezoning item on a consent agenda. I think it makes sense for planning and zoning to have more time, for me to have more time. I did reach out to other corporation councils, and I can tell you that Chippewa County uses a consent agenda for rezonings, as does Marathon County.
Do we know how many? Because Marathon County, I feel like they would have a lot of zoning since it's the most, I think it's the largest by volume, right? So by area.
I do not know.
Right.
Because again, I was just trying to get as much information, but if I have more time, I could. So bottom line is, planning and zoning had pause for putting county zoning, rezoning on a consent agenda. They did not have those concerns when it related to approving town rezoning. But for county rezoning, there was pause.
Do you think if we postpone this resolution until the next meeting, does that give you enough time?
I think we should be able to have more time to vet it.
Okay.
It's because obviously the public hearing component, all rezoning has to have a public hearing component. So that brings up other concerns. And there's no doubt in my mind, if there is a protest petition after a zoning decision is made, that would not be appropriate for being on a consent agenda.
Okay. So here's the thing. If we postpone action on this resolution to the next JPS meeting, it actually doesn't matter if we do it today or the next, because regardless, it's going to be December 20th. So there's no difference between voting now or voting during the next meeting, right? So I think it makes a lot of sense then to, I'm going to place a motion to postpone until the next JPS meeting, which is, I should know this, but I don't know when the next JPS meeting is by date. Do you have your calendar? Well, it's the first Monday,
December 5th.
December 5th. So I move to postpone this resolution to the next JPS meeting, which is December 6th.
I have a comment, James, if I can.
1 second. We have a second discussion.
It's a consent agenda. If we know that there is a hearing that's necessary, we can just, any supervisor could just pull it off the consent agenda and either postpone it to the next meeting or else go into the details that are necessary to resolve any questions that would pertain. So that, yes, it's a technicality, but it's sufficiently flexible vehicle to accommodate that kind of a need. But let's vote on the postponement.
Sounds great. And by the way, before we do that, I just want to make a comment. I think this is a fantastic idea. I mean, we have to figure out, make sure it's going to work, of course. But as all of you know, and Supervisor Eisen and I have had many conversations about looking at the rules and asking where we can do things better and different, right? Regardless of where we're coming from, you know, making things more efficient. And I think this is a great example of something that we hopefully can do to kind of help with the meeting length and focus our efforts a little bit too. Because I feel like sometimes there's a saying, you know, like a squirrel chasing, you know, shiny objects. I feel like we as a board are kind of like that. And I mean, I'm going to say I'm like that, you know, I mean, we're all guilty of that. So I think anything that we can do to help focus our efforts, I think is we should absolutely at least consider very much so. So with that, all in favor of postponement until December 5th? Aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes. All right, so that closes item number 8 on the agenda. Item number 9, consideration vote resolution, ongoing commitment of the oath of the Winnebago County Board. So this is one that has some history, right? So this was originally given to the board via Supervisor Eisen as a replacement. And I think we had this conversation at the committee, so I don't need to necessarily rehash all of that. But we did have a conversation at committee of, you know, there's some good stuff here. And we thought it would be worthwhile to bring it forward, but not under a person, but rather under the committee as a way to reinforce our commitment to the oath that we've all taken. We did get some feedback from someone, which I will speak to once we formally introduce this. And so I think I'll do that actually right now. So do we have a motion to?
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion to introduce resolution ongoing commitment to the oath of the Winnebago County Board.
Do we have a second? Second. And we have a second. Okay. Now we have discussion. Yes, Supervisor.
First question I would present that we've already discussed earlier to a different issue. If an amendment or a substitute is lost, another substantially the same shall not be entertained. The question I would represent is, after having explored this tonight, does this come under the umbrella that this was defeated by the county board as a substitute amendment to the First Amendment counties?
Are you talking about the organizational meeting?
No. So this is the conversation, may I? This is the conversation you and I had when we first started talking about this. And that was, This was a substitute amendment for the First Amendment. We as a board voted against it as an amendment. And so my first question to you was, all right, can we bring it forward as its own resolution? Now, the short answer is yes. Would you still have that opinion as Supervisor Eisen is posing?
I would, because I believe this is substantially different than the other amendment that we were talking about, the First Amendment, and then at one point there was the Second Amendment. And so, yes, I think this is substantially different than the situation with 18.7.
And if I may, Corporation Counsel, because this was defeated as a substitute amendment, I guess just to get your reasoning behind the decision you made, because it was defeated as a substitute, does that change anything in regards to saying that, hey, this never was its own individual resolution that was defeated at the board, but instead was brought up under a different order of business as a substitute?
I think what I have to do is refresh my recollection. If you could tell me
Right, so
when this was.
yeah, so I think this was in either the September, I think this was the September business meeting or the August business meeting.
I believe it was the August.
So it was the August business meeting when we debated the First Amendment sanctuary resolution. Supervisor Eisen at that meeting introduced this resolution as a substitution amendment, which was defeated. And then the board voted to indefinitely postpone the First Amendment sanctuary resolution as a whole. So does this, and I'm just making sure we're
Sure.
crossing our eyes,
Yeah.
as we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, does this also fall under that indefinite postponement?
So, and I'm sorry, I was listening to Julie Bartels. So when the First Amendment resolution came up, it was indefinitely postponed, is that correct?
Yes.
And then Supervisor Eisen,
No. So this was introduced and
this
no,
ongoing.
the First Amendment sanctuary was introduced.
Mhm.
The first motion, once we got into it, right, was Supervisor Eisen to substitute the First Amendment sanctuary resolution with essentially the language we see in front of us today, which was voted down as a substitute. Then we went on to the normal discussion of that resolution. At some point down the road during the discussion, there was a motion for indefinite postponement, which passed.
But that was as to the First Amendment.
That was to the first question, not to this. Correct. And that's why you had said, no, we're okay.
That's correct. Thank you for refreshing my recollection.
That being said, Mr. Chairman, I think this is, I think this gets to the gist of what Supervisor Hanford was trying to do in this First Amendment sanctuary resolution, given the fact that neither the First Amendment one nor the Second Amendment one were ordinance changes. They were just statements if you will. Because they weren't ordinance changes, I think this also kind of cuts to the chase, if you will. And I like it. I think it's something that, if the other one was indefinitely postponed, I still am of the mind that we need to make some sort of statement on this. So I will be voting for this. And I think that it is it's well done. And that I think it's also good that we introduce it as a committee to the board instead of as just individual supervisors taking action. So there's my 2 cents on it.
Okay. So I have a thought and then I want to share some feedback. So, because I've asked, I believe it's 2 sessions ago at the county board, I implored people to come to this meeting so we can discuss versus discussing it board. So I want to be respectful of that. But before I do that, I just want to also just kind of piggyback on what you're saying, Supervisor. I also, when I went through that First Amendment, this is how I read it. This is how I read it. Like, we're all gonna just say, yes, Constitution's good, yes. We need to follow by these rules. And I think for me, it's an ongoing commitment, right? And that's what I really liked about this idea is that it's not just a static point in time. that we do once we first get elected. And that day is a blur. It is for me. I don't know about you all. That whole, the first month was quite a blur. And so I think it's good to go back continually to commit to the things that we said we were going to do, right? I know personally, that's one of my frustrations with, national politics is they oftentimes make these promises and they never go back to what they were promising. So I really, really think it's a very useful tool for us, as well as a commitment to those that we serve. So I also support it for that reason. We had a person give feedback, and I want to share it because I think we need to view other perspectives and make sure that whatever we have is something that we feel can have good and substantial conversation at the board, right? So we're not getting into this quagmire, right? So
Supervisor from District 2.
thank you. Yeah, supervisor from District 2, which is Rebecca Nichols. And I'm not going to read the entire thing because she does a really good job of writing here. So, okay, so she is concerned that this, I'll just read it verbatim. I'm concerned that this resolution takes the originalist approach to the Constitution. By recognizing only the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, the resolution ignores the remaining 17. Among those are the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, the 14th Amendment granting due process and equal protection under the law, the 15th Amendment granting the right to vote regardless of race or color, and the 19th Amendment granting women the right to vote. I took an oath to uphold the entire Constitution, not just part of it. Additionally, the Wisconsin State Constitution uses Article 1 of its Constitution to ratify the original Bill of Rights and provide additional rights to Wisconsin citizens. There are 27 sections to Article 1 of the Wisconsin State Constitution. I took an oath to uphold all of them, along with the entire state constitution. For those reasons, and because our oath of office requires us to uphold the entire Constitution, I respectfully asked JPS committee to remove lines 11 to 20 from the resolution. That's in the whereas. So it doesn't necessarily change the to be it further resolved. So that's the actual resolution, right? So this is the preamble of the resolution. She's suggesting that we take out those specific points and just reinforce that it's the Constitution in its entirety. So that is her feedback that I think we should at least consider as we look at this resolution. So with that, do we have any additional? Yes, Supervisor Hanson.
Do you have any, I wish that the supervisor was here because I recognize what she's saying, but that's not the way I'm reading lines 11 through 20 or interpreting it. Did you have any other conversation?
No, I just actually, if it wasn't for Supervisor Eisen, I wouldn't have seen it at all.
Yeah,
As she said,
Supervisor Nichols is a councilman on the city of Menasha, and she's at a meeting right now. From the email and from a conversation that I had with her, and I suggested that she send the email to our chairman. She was concerned that this resolution only refers to the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And she would want us to reaffirm our oath to the entire Constitution. not just the first 10 Bill of Rights, but all the other amendments as well, including women's suffrage. So, you know,
Right. Mr. Chairman.
it's difficult to fight with truth.
No, it doesn't mean that we can't add to this to clarify that, because I think this is the point that you were making, Supervisor Hanson, and one that actually was made prior to our meeting with, by Supervisor Eisen, which the First Amendment sanctuary, I think, fell to this, and that is, everyone looked at it and saw something a little different, right? So there, I look at that and I necessarily don't see it, but I can understand the concern around it. Doesn't mean that we have to remove it. It might mean that we actually change it to make it very clear that this includes all of them, including these. And there's other ways to get it to address that concern, which I think is a legitimate concern. So yes.
I hate to put you on the spot, and it's been forever since I had a U.S. history class, 1983 at the university, maybe. On 9/11, Bill of Rights was the first 10, so I don't see that was the Bill of Rights. So I don't see by either changing or altering that in this resolution that it excludes anything after 10.
Well, we
And
should.
I apologize, it's been forever since I've taken the history class, so, but that's what I'm remembering. Am I incorrect?
Are you going to answer?
Well, no, I was just,
Okay.
whatever. he's done.
One second then, Supervisor. Did you have any thoughts to that?
I would just say again, based on your reading of this email, the resolution starts with the entire United States Constitution. And I think, again, what Supervisor Nichols is talking about is to mirror the fact that you're talking about the entire Constitution. You don't want to limit it to the first 10 amendments. That's just my.
So then,
Supervisor Jeffrey.
Yeah, and I think that despite the fact, I do think that Supervisor Nichols' concern is valid. It definitely is valid. You know, how I look at it is I look at line 17, where it says, all people are born equally free and independent and have certain, and then following in lines 18 to 20, inherent rights. Among these, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. So I think that all people part of it covers all of the stuff that she is concerned about. And I think that's probably the most important thing for me, is that, and I get her concern. I get it. It makes sense. I think line 17 actually directly addresses her concerns.
Supervisor Plum.
yes, I just kind of spitballing. I have a proposed amendment, and this is just on line 11 itself. That would be the only thing I would add to it. So striking the Bill of Rights out of the first 10 amendments, and whereas, 27 amendments have been, and then after amendments have been added over time to the United States Constitution in order to provide specific guarantees of personal freedoms, clearly defined limitations and so on. So basically just adding and noting all 27 instead of reworking and removing lines 11 through 20, but noting that they're all 27 amendments. I guess I could reapproach that and say the Bill of Rights and 17 subsequent amendments, but that just sounds more easy. I guess this is just a stab at, I guess just coming to a compromise in some way, or just, I guess, acknowledging all 27 amendments to those items. But that's essentially what I would have. I mean, I would like to talk about it before we introduce it as an actual amendment. But saying whereas, 27, so we strike the Bill of Rights added the first time, but whereas, 27 amendments, the caret mark have been added over time to the United States Constitution in order to, and then it moves from there. The rest of it is altered. Marianne, I did the copy on paper if you'd like to see it, but that's just my 2 cents. If somebody would like to take that up as a motion, I think it acknowledges all 27 amendments without throwing the baby out the bathwater.
I will, are you doing a motion for that?
No, I just wonder if there's any other conversation before I do a motion for that. And
I just want to echo what Supervisor Defferty, or excuse me, Defferty said. I fully acknowledge what Supervisor Nichols is saying. And recognize what she's saying. There's absolute validity to what she's saying. So I'd be very interested to hear your end and further discussion on the amendment Supervisor Sloan just proposed.
Commission Council, any thoughts?
I believe what Supervisor Sloan suggested is totally appropriate based on the email that you raised, but again, not for me to decide how you
Right.
folks want it, but I think it addresses concerns that were raised in that email.
well, then I will go ahead and move to amend line 11 of this resolution. And then after whereas, after the comma there, we are going to strike the Bill of Rights added the first 10. And then instead of those words, we will put 27 spelled out amendments. And then after amendments, we will then add between amendments and 2 have been added over time. I have the paper copy.
I make a friendly amendment to your amendment. Just strike the 27, just say amendments. Because then you've got all 27 of them.
Yeah, what do you think?
You don't
Yes.
have to say
Okay,
27,
maybe another.
just say amendments. You got the Constitution, and then you got amendments. So
But what if, possibly, what if we said all amendments? Because I'm hoping
Okay.
then that
I'm good with,
that's, lack of a better word, a comfort blanket to everybody.
Yeah.
Um,
okay,
No, I will go ahead and accept Supervisor Eisen and Supervisor Hanson's friendly amendments to my amendment. So on line 11, we're just going to strike after the comma, the Bill of Rights added the first 10. So then we'll strike that. But then after the comma, whereas all amendments and then include have been added over time to the United States Constitution in order to, and that would be the end of line 11, that would continue on as is.
can I
Second.
perfect that?
oh, please.
Okay. Whereas the amendments to the United States Constitution provide specific guarantees of personal freedoms clearly defined. And on with it. So you don't have to say, you can be a wordsmith and
Right.
just pick out everything that doesn't apply. Just say, whereas the amendments to the United States Constitution provide specific guarantees of personal freedoms, and go on with the next half dozen lines.
Perfect. All right, I'm gonna second that.
So instead, so we'll just start over again on line 11.
Perfectly what he
Yeah,
said.
well, on line 11, we'll strike after the comma on the whereas, the Bill of Rights added the first 10, and then after the comma, we'll just have the amendments to the United States Constitution and strike in order to. Now we'll just go.
And I second that. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? That passes. Now, we need to vote on passage as amended.
So then I will move to the final passage on resolution 100 commitment to the oath of the Winnebago County Board as amended.
Second. Okay, discussion? All right, all in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay, that passes. Cool. All right, we're going to close then item number 9 and move to item number 10. Yes. So this one is one that is going to follow the same path that I had outlined before, is that I'm going to actually bring this forward to the committee, but I would like the committee to vote on this as a committee, not just as a person. But I will give you some feedback on why it's here. So two things. First is, as we look at the rules, we all know that there's a lot of opportunity for improvement. And it's a little hodgepodge. And part of that is the definitions that we have in there. And unfortunately, some of the definitions are a little too vague or have not been updated as we've gone along with new versions of Robert's Rules of Order. There are a few areas in which I believe need particular attention straight away. Now, one can make the argument that perhaps we should be looking at the rules from beginning to end and really digging in. But that's a longer project and something that we would have to have conversation on. So I know this is a little bit of a Band-Aid, and I acknowledge that, but it's one that I think deserves some discussion at the very least. And these definitions are a result of conversation that we had with the indefinite postponement. This is the impetus of this. And the question is, how do you handle an indefinite postponement? Okay, so Roberts will say that it's postponed until the next session. Okay, what is a session? And our rules do not give proper focus on what a session is or a meeting or a few other areas. I had some conversation with Jake Curtis on this specific area as well during WCA. Really glad I went. I gotta say, I learned a lot and I had a good opportunity to dig into some of these things. And this is one of them. And this is kind of how it all worked out is he looked at it and said, well, a session is not the term. A session is that meeting, right? Though Corporation Counsel has a slightly different opinion on it. The opinion is it's for the term.
It's 2 years, session.
Not necessarily, depending on what you look at. So,
Historically, that's what it's been.
but
They used to meet once a year to improve the budget.
so good conversation, but let's do a formal and then we can have discussion. So that is why this is being discussed right now. Okay. So with that, is it something that we as a committee want to have further discussion on? So I would look for someone to have a motion.
Motion to introduce resolution amend section 9.0 definition to the rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors by revising the definition of session, rule 9.9, and special orders of business meeting, rule 9.10, and creating the definition of regular business meeting and
I'll second it so we can discuss.
Okay, thank you. All right, discussion.
I have a question for Corporation Counsel. Was this at all, so, the rules of the county board are different from the recoding process, but given the fact that we are going through recoding, I may as well ask, if we do go ahead and change these definitions, or at least clearly define them, would that tamper with recoding at all?
Recodification?
Yeah. I don't think so.
No,
I just wanted
no.
to make sure.
My concern, as I've shared with Supervisor Stafford, is that if you were, let me start by saying there is no question, I agree with Supervisor Stafford that some of our definitions need wordsmithing. There is no question. The concern I have is that if we were to adopt at least the definition of session as it's presented, it would allow for almost endless reconsideration of items at all meetings during the 2-year term. If we were to say a session is essentially a county board meeting, all right, then that could mean that the next meeting or a month later, the same item could be brought up, despite the fact that the board had considered that item and voted against it, perhaps,
Unless they use the proper motion.
unless they use the proper
And
motion.
that's my point, is that the motion should have been postponed to a certain time, not indefinitely. So someone could have said, I want to postpone this resolution to April of 24. No, March, I'm sorry, March of 24, which would be the end of the current term.
But
Because we should be clear, right? It doesn't say term. And I've spoken to a lot of people much smarter than I on Robert's rules, and they all
Yeah,
say
I
the
hate
same
to get
thing.
the bill that you'll get from the lawyer.
and again, I think obviously we have to talk about this because there's a lot to think about here. I had reached out to other counties regarding their definitions, and they basically said a session is a 2-year term. One talks about the fact that a session shall run from the commencement of the first meeting following election of supervisors in April, and even number years to the commencement of the same meeting 2 years later. But that's other counties. But we also have our county. I had also reached out to Atoli's and Andy Phillips, who, as you know, Jay Curtis was
Right.
with that firm.
Did you get some feedback too?
Yeah,
All
and
right,
he
great.
said, the concern is the way that the definition of session is drafted. He talked about the fact that it is essentially preventing what it would allow defeated legislation to be brought up again and again.
Not if the right motion's made, though. I mean, it's a little semantic. I understand that, but a lot of Roberts is semantics, honestly. Right. But that does not, because if someone has a motion to say, because actually Roberts is pretty clear on this, is that the more times than not, Roberts would say, and I know this because I actually called Roberts, and they would say, well, you need to use a time. They would rather you use a specific time when postponing, right? That is the gold standard of that. So if you mean it's a term, then you should say it's a term. And that's my point relative to that. And it is semantics. It is, but we have to agree on these semantics.
I would say, as we've talked about, and again, I mean, I look at this, email from Attorney Phillips. The way that it is, the definition of session, I'm not talking about, the special orders or any of that, but session is they're all critical, but sessions is really important. And if we are to, if your body is to adopt the definition as it stands now, putting aside motion for indefinite postponement, the concern is there could be endless reconsideration of items that had already been addressed. That's the concern.
So if I may, you're basically saying that if the supervisor introduces a resolution and sends it directly to the board, that he or she could do that endlessly.
With this current definition of
With this-
session.
With this definition of session, basically, they don't even need to do a PQ. They could say, I'm just going to reintroduce it again because that's the end of the session.
It's a new session.
Which is a new session. So and then I have a follow-up question for you. The way that Congress does things is that they have one Congress split into two sections. Most of the time, sometimes they can kind of mess it up. If we decided that we're going to go ahead and define a session as a single fiscal year or budgetary cycle, would that be a little, in your opinion, from the legal perspective, would that be more feasible? And I would also open it up to the chairman and ask if that would be something that he would think would be helpful or would just clog things up with people's pet projects that they're going to reintroduce every year.
I think the way that it is worded now is problematic because, again, it could allow someone to bring up a resolution at the next meeting. Okay? I think we can certainly wordsmith this even more. If you're talking about 2 sessions, I think that's certainly honing it down compared to what this is. But again, as Supervisor Eisen indicated, the practice has always been 2 years. It doesn't mean that it's right or wrong, but that's what the practice is. I have other counties saying their session is defined as 2 years. I know that the definition in this rule does need to be fixed and tweaked. There's no question about it.
Because the reality is that right now, if you look at the rules, it doesn't say that either. It doesn't say it's 2 years, it doesn't say it's a term, it says nothing. And that's my point, is I am more trying to push discussion on having a better definition, less so on what the actual definition is. I have a point of view on it, right? But for me, I feel like we need to provide greater detail for future bodies when it comes to these words, and these are some key words. And session and how we use session in this county, we have a budget session. We use session 3 or 4 different ways, and I think that adds to confusion. Right? So no, we're saying, well, a session's a term, but if it's a budget session, that's different. And we don't make a distinction within session, within the definition of session. So currently. So I believe that there's opportunity there to improve that upon. Now, maybe we need to, I was going to say table it. Maybe we need to postpone it. Not indefinitely, but postpone it and give it some more thought, and maybe more discussion needs to happen.
Chairman,
Yes.
why don't you just pull it, then bring it back when you resolve the issues that are
Right.
presented.
And I'm saying somewhat,
You
I'm
don't have
saying,
to postpone it. You can just pull it and bring it back.
I know, I
when you're ready.
understand. I'm thinking about bringing it back for us to have more of it, just a general discussion on what the wording should be.
You call a special session and do it. I mean, don't
Special
keep
session.
it, don't keep the administrative members of our.
Supervisor Eisen, that's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I just said.
Yeah,
So we're in agreement. We could stop talking.
just pull it and
So-
bring it back.
Okay,
after-
well, we're good.
And discuss it after the sheriff's.
Supervisor Eisen, we're good. Thank you. So I'm gonna pull it.
Time where you might reintroduce this, only because I really think definitions need very clear.
I'm going to be bringing this as a discussion item in December. I'm not gonna let this sit, because it really does need to be resolved. We need to look at it.
Right,
Right? And I just want to make sure we're clear that I am not pushing a point of view. I want this to be fixed. Exactly. All right, so we're gonna pull that. We're gonna close item 6. Oh,
And I think it's a good idea that we're not being hasty, because
right.
the last thing we want is to have a situation where we create more issues.
No, we want to make sure that whatever we do, we think through, right? And so for that reason, that's what we're gonna do. All righty, closing item 10, opening item 11, sheriff's report.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hello.
So start out with next month, with your permission, I will present on CIP projects. And then we will go to the board for presentation in January.
Okay.
I've I want to talk a little bit about the inmate death that we had, which you were notified of during budget hearings. I don't have an update for you. We're waiting for toxicology. It could be 6 to 8 weeks.
Toxicology, final autopsy report, 6 to 8 weeks, toxicology, probably around 30 days.
Okay, so 6 to 8 weeks for the final autopsy. And I will let you know as soon as I know.
Can you share anything about the situation or anything about the investigation?
Sure. The inmate was in our jail for about 20 hours, had been in a receiving area, left there and went into pre-class, which is what we do before they end up going into the main part of our jail. It's a singular cell, but under observation. We were actually had 2 deputies in the pod at the time. We had an FTO and a trainee. You know, as far as the investigation is being done by Fond du Lac County. You know, I feel good about the investigation. I feel good about where we're at. But obviously we need to wait and find out where we are with the cause. But again, speaking to the how fragile our inmates are. Now I don't want to, I'll just speak in generalities. Inmates are much more inclined to abuse drugs, much more inclined to abuse opioids, which causes long-term effects, even for somebody as young as this gentleman who was 36, I believe. It can really take a toll on the body. So they're coming in much more fragile. When you look at the amount of transports to the hospital, the ER that we have had compared to other years, we're blowing that out of the water. So even with 24-hour care here, we still are sending inmates to ER to be tested on, obviously, the equipment that we don't have available to us and the expertise that we don't always have available.
When was the last time we had a death?
Well, I don't know the exact date, but I do remember that it was an elderly female who I'm going to say was about 2014, where she did not die here, but died at the hospital, but for all intents and purposes, passed away here. And it was, she had some severe medical issues, and really jail was not the appropriate spot, but that's what she was sentenced to. A dialysis 2 or 3 times a week. So we were transporting her for those appointments. And yeah, that is the last one that I can recall.
And how does this impact the inmate population as well as the deputies within the jail?
Certainly, we're human, the deputies and the inmates. And we have offered services to both. The inmates, I was there immediately after this occurred. There were some very upset inmates, very upset deputies. It's not something you typically see, not something that we get called to death scenes, we get called to car crashes, etc. But to actually find it, to actually be there, feel some responsibility, I guess, just because we're human. The inmates, same thing, feel some responsibility. What could I have done differently? So definitely impacts our people and the inmates here. Yeah,
Yeah, so,
He was in custody only 20 hours?
I believe it was 20 hours, yes.
You know what, may I ask what his initial charge was to bring him there?
I don't know. I don't want to speak out of school. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
In regards to like, just the amount of time that you do transporting, those to either the hospital, doctor, wherever. I'm just just out of curiosity, is there like a log that you have in place of like deputies that are dispatched to do those tasks?
Sure.
You do? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so in our computer aided dispatch program, transport from the jail to the hospital is one of those
Mhm.
calls. So we mine the data that way.
Okay. That, I guess, it might be something that we could take a look at for 2022, is just take a look at that log. I'd be curious myself, just to see how often we have law enforcement officers being taken out of their, out of the jail to be, transporting those. I'm just curious on the numbers.
It's often, and it's usually patrol deputies that are pulled from their area to take the inmates to the hospital and wait for them. I think I talked about this at budget, to do a committal. So somebody that is in need of mental health services, and they're being placed on a 72-hour hold, and we're between 5.5 to 7 hours at the hospital to get medically cleared. I'm not pointing any fingers, but certainly if I'm in a mental health crisis and now I'm waiting for 5.5 hours or 7 hours in the ER with the cop, that's not going to help my mental well-being. So we need to do something to change that. We're working on that, actually working on it statewide, but there are agencies like Eau Claire, as an example, that one of the sheriff there gave, where it can be more than a 24-hour call because they're spending 10 hours or more at the hospital, then they're driving 5 hours to come here. And that's not including the time that they're at the call before they get to the hospital. Then they drive here, then they drive back. So we're talking about 3 different shifts that are involved in one incident. So it is very, very labor intensive.
I'm sorry. Do you think that, is this something that you'd be able to put together for us at the end of December? Is the amount of times that your officers have been transporting inmates?
Yep, we're pulling that data together right now.
Okay.
And we're hoping, I'm hoping to set up a meeting with the CEOs of the hospitals in our area, Winnebago and Fond du Lac Mental Health, and our crisis, to see what we can do to speed this up. Whether it's we go to one hospital and they not dedicate staff, but give us a priority there and at the lab. So we can get people help quicker, and we get our police officers back on patrol, because it is sucking resources like you can't imagine.
Yeah. Do you think just generally you get an ETA on that by the end of January or sooner?
I think it'll be sooner. I don't know that we'll get the meeting together, because I truly want the decision makers at the meeting, not someone else.
Okay.
That's what we're hoping. We did this back in 2006.
Mhm.
It helped for a while. And a lot of it had to do with patient rights issues where, there's certain things they can share and can't share with us, the hospitals. But it was actually dangerous, some of the information we were not getting. Somebody who's on a committal at Mercy in their mental health area, and we have domestic battery charges, and they won't let us know when they're released. Get released, and now homicide. And actually, we didn't have a homicide, but we did have from someone who was released. So we're able to work through some of those issues, and we were able to do that by getting the decision makers in the room. So that's important.
Yeah.
Police chiefs are all on board, so we'll all be there.
Okay. Okay, great.
May I just ask, Sheriff, if you're allowed to disclose this, I don't know if you are, if it's a breach of privacy, was there overdose and cardiac arrest? I mean, what, we still don't know?
Don't know. We have to wait until the final autopsy comes from our coroner's office. But I will share it with you as soon as we know. There have been instances in other counties where there's been deaths where inmates have
hid things in their body cavities, those have burst open, and they die of an overdose because it's absorbed in their system. I have no idea whether or not that is the case here, but certainly it could be. And I know that it's happened in other towns.
We have that special machine, don't we?
We do, but it's not,
X-rays.
right, we do have a scanner, and I think I don't know with this particular group, if I shared some of our, where we caught contraband coming into the facility, but it's not a cure-all. I mean, it's not, there's shadows, there's all kinds of different things that can obscure the object, whatever it might be. So it's not 100%, and it's not, we can't use medical strength. We can't turn the machine up like you would in a hospital. So it has limitations. But we try. Yes.
Are you, it's something that very, in my opinion, very rarely gets talked about. Are you comfortable with the support the inmates received regarding this new, and your staff as well? Because a lot of people don't want to talk about what really happens to the deputies involved. They just go to the narrative that's inflammatory. Are you comfortable with the support given or available to you?
Yeah, I am. I wish our deputies would take more advantage of what is offered to them. But I can't make them. Right? That's detrimental. We do have a mental health individual, a EAP person that comes here once a week. And our deputies and all our staff is able to speak to her. We require them to speak to her once a year. I know that's not a lot, but they can make appointments with her right here on site. And they do that. Some do that. We do have debriefings in critical situations where we get, there's no administrators, no bosses in the room. It's really just to talk about what happened and how you feel about what happened. Our younger generation is much better at talking about their feelings. My generation is much more, put it in a box and then you'll worry about it later. And that's law enforcement as a whole. That's kind of an issue with law enforcement, even with the younger generation. But we do find that they're much more open. As far as the inmates are concerned, we have a crisis that is available by contacting them, the county services. Then we also have 40 hours of mental health professional that comes into the jail and meets with the inmates. Those inmates were offered that were in that cell block to meet with them. I don't know how many took advantage of it.
I'm respectful that it's available.
Yeah, it is available. Forcing someone, yeah. But it does, it speaks to how vulnerable that population is. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to do the NG 911, but right at the end, because Captain Vendola will follow up with stats and all that stuff. Just to let you know, inmates do have the opportunity to vote, and I don't know how many have taken advantage of it, but there are instructions on how they can do that, those that are eligible. Also let you know that the Lake Winnebago area MEG unit, which is the 4-county drug unit, their third quarter stats, 4 times the amount of fentanyl seized in the first 3 quarters this year than what the entire last year. So we are concerned, obviously, with the amount of fentanyl that is on the street, which is causing an uptick in overdoses, suicides, and all those things. We've had some very horrific events just in the last 5 days in our county. So just with suicides and those types of things. So yeah, it's been trying.
So forgive me, there is another drug that is even worse than fentanyl. I forget the name.
W18
Yes, and are we seeing that in this area?
Just ask the corner, and we have not.
No, okay, good.
It's 100 times stronger than fentanyl. They saw it in Kansas City, I think, and then in Florida. But I haven't heard much about it when the first bit of information came out about it. Then I haven't heard any more. So hopefully, even our drug dealers knew that it was a bad idea. Hopefully.
Is it an opioid?
It is,
Yeah.
it's just, yeah, it's a even stronger. Yeah, super.
Sorry, thank you.
Hans, would you mind, I don't know if you can share these, but could you email those stats to me about the make unit?
Sure. I don't know what is, I gotta talk to the supervisor and find out what is like public knowledge.
Sure,
I can give
versus
you
what
pieces
is.
of it. Because I remember him speaking to not sharing certain things. But I will get back to all of you.
Thank you.
And then NG 911. So we talked about NG 911. Our county has done a really good job staying up on technology piece of it, to make sure that our servers are large enough, to make sure that we can meet the needs to participate in the NG 911 project. The issue is having uniform addresses. Our addresses, we were at 90.77% of meeting the criteria, or 90.77% of our addresses meet the criteria to join NG 911. It's a universal uniform addressing system, and we need to be at 98% or more. And in order to get there, one staff member, if you use one staff member, it would take 1 to 5 years in order to do that, to meet that criteria. There's that many addresses that do not meet that criteria, and it's a GIS position. The county exec is aware of it. Allegheny County, I know, signed on. However, they're worse than we are. So if we signed on to agree to participate in NG 911, it would be ceremonious only because we don't meet the criteria. And we need to do some, we have talked to Allegheny County, there's this discussion with Allegheny County to share, I know what you have, the map. But that's not the whole story. We don't know if there are counties that meet the criteria, but I can tell you Allegheny does not. They're in worse shape than we are, even though they signed on as far as a uniform addressing system is concerned. The county exec is aware, and he has talked to Allegheny County about sharing a position or positions in order to address the two counties, because we share the CAD system with them, or we share the radio system with them. We have the same platform on CAD. We have the ability to dispatch, and we're just not there. We need to do something. And
Do we have timing on resolving this, or at least getting a meeting in place to?
We've had several meetings.
yeah,
Can I, do you mind? Okay.
yeah, come on up. This is the expert.
Yeah, that's a great word. So we've had several meetings with Allegheny County, and I say we, it's mainly the GIS department that has had those meetings with Allegheny County and Calumet County. We have the system that we use currently, and this is gonna get too technical, and it's definitely GIS related. But our GIS department shares a data set with Allegheny County, and it's actually housed at Allegheny County. And the way that we upgrade and the way that we share information, they keep the core and they just push us data, and we do it monthly. That's greatly oversimplified. The system that we've had in place for years and years and years with Allegheny County will not support NG 911. So we have to do something different. And so we're at, Jerry Bougie right now is in talks with Allegheny, trying to decide do we continue to let them house it? Do we continue to share? Do we try to separate, which actually doesn't make any sense at this point. It makes sense to keep it because of all the border stuff that we have. And they're actually floating right now. It's their hope that they're actually going to hire consultants between the two counties, split between the two counties, and figure out what the best process is to move forward to try to get some of this data ready
The sheriff used the term addresses. That's a little bit simplified. It's not addresses as you would know it. It's not 123 Main Street is wrong and 456 Smith Street is wrong. Each segment of roadway within all the counties basically between driveway to driveway, road to road, intersection have to have a unique identifier. In Winnebago County right now, our 90% correct sounds great. And when the state did the study with each county back in 2000, they came back, they had meetings with us over Zoom and said, you guys are at 90%, you're one of the best we've seen all around the state. You guys are doing great. Well, 90% correct is over 500,000 errors that we have to change. And that GIS calculated it, and they figure the low estimate, it's going to take about 2,400 man hours to do it. And the high estimate, if they're more complex errors, they were thinking somewhere around 12,000 hours work. So that's 5 years. So we hope it's not going to take that long. We really hope it's going to take much less time, and we've been plunking away at it from our side that we can do. They're working on it from their side that they can do. And, globally, we have to try to figure out where we get extra people from to do that work, because everybody has their own work to do, right?
What about the other counties that surround us? So like Fond du Lac and Wapaka and Calumet?
I haven't spoken to Alpaca. Calumet was actually in on the meetings that we've had. I kind of forget about them sometimes because they're a little smaller, but they're actually participating in this meeting as well.
Okay.
Fond du Lac just had a major change in their staffing down there, and they're sort of starting over, but they're all similarly situated. Some of the other counties around us, around our area as well, don't have the infrastructure in place. In the 911 center, we upgraded our equipment about 18 months ago. Some of those other counties haven't done that yet either. So it's two parts. And the GIS part is much more significant than the actual hardware piece inside the facility. The state knows it, whether or not they recognize it. Kind of what people are hoping for is that the state decides they're going to sort of take a global view of this and try to tackle it if they want it to happen.
So, and I don't want to necessarily kind of over exaggerate anything, so please,
Sure.
but you had said something like 10,000 addresses.
It's not addresses.
Or I'm sorry,
It's segments.
locations?
It's segments, I guess, is the best way to describe
you.
it. Yeah.
So I'm going to assume that means that the metric behind that is that there's a certain segment of our population that's at risk then, right?
So
Putting it into like a life bucket.
yes and no. The way that Winnebago County has done the addresses the issue with the errors are that the addresses, the format that we've used, there's no state uniformity. There's no way to, so the state, when they created this, started talking about SDNet several years ago, and they contracted with AT&T, they said, okay, this is the format, everybody has to use this format. So we have to make our data fit the format. To do that, we have to change 500,000 lines on the spreadsheet. Manually, one by one, and it involves stretching points on GPS plots, and that's way beyond what I can do. I can't describe that any better than that. But when the GIS department looked at it and they calculated it out, again, they're guessing it's going to take somewhere around 2,400 hours to do it,
Right.
at a minimum.
Right. So what I'm trying to get at is I'm trying to understand the level of public safety
Right.
that's at risk as a result of this.
So today there isn't risk because our comm center knows how that data looks in our CAD. Our CAD is configured to our data set. It won't configure to Outagamies. It won't configure to Fond du Lac. It's not going to configure to other state because there is no state. The state really just said several months ago, they came up with all of the standards that have to be met with the GIS and said, yep, Winnebago, this group of data needs to change. It doesn't match. You have to port it all over to get it to match at the cloud level at the NG 911. But it matches where we are in our own system today. It's just that the idea of NG 911 is interoperability and globalness. It's not. It's very local right now.
Are there any other questions?
I guess I just Superintendent Stafford kind of covered what I was going to say, and I guess if I can just kind of get a view of this, the addresses themselves aren't wrong because I know we have multiple addressing systems in the county. We have rural addressing systems and urban addressing systems. It's not the name, it's not the numbers you see on the building. It's the fact what it matches in the state's data set as compared to.
Yeah, yeah, and and when it relates to NG 911, 911 was created in the 60s based on people picking up a phone on a wall. And you can attach that to a physical location. That was very easy to say, yep, I pick up a phone, it's at 4311 Jackson Street. Now, if I call on my cell phone, it might put me at 4311 Jackson Street, it might put me at Jackson and Cope, it might put me in the backfield by the highway shop. And NG 911 is about getting cell phones to be plotted correctly. So it's
GPS
close.
data with that.
Yeah, it's close, but it's not, I mean, we're not gonna not do it, it's just gonna take longer than we thought it was going to.
So basically, there are Sheriff Mott said 97% correct. So we need
No, 90%,
90%,
90.77, almost 91.
Okay, so
We're
for
about
that,
91%.
so for that, basically then 8, yeah, well, no, it's almost, well, about 10%.
Close, yeah.
10 points roughly that needs to be upgraded within the system. So that's basically, if I can just kind of wrap my mind around this, because I'm just going to claim ignorance on this because I haven't necessarily seen or worked with this. Essentially, for those remaining addresses, for that remaining, I guess like 8.3% odd, you would then need to correct them in the system to what the state is looking for in order to get the similarity and uniformity down.
Right.
Okay.
And they're saying, the state is saying that 98% would be like the recommended piece. That's where they want to see agencies at. That's, they came in and told everybody what 98% should
So
be.
7.3%.
Yeah, and GIS actually broke it down a little bit further and said 490,000 of those errors are in the GIS department that they have to fix, and 10,000 are with the data in the comm center. And it's not really the data in the comm center, it's the data, the 911, AMI, MSEG data that AT&T hosts, basically attached to addresses. So if I looked in AT&T's data to try to find 123 Main Street in Oshkosh, it's going to give me phone numbers that the last business owner had, the business owner before, the guy that owned it. It's going to give me 27 different phone numbers, and we have to figure out which one is the correct one today, not the one that was the right one 25 years ago, because AT&T didn't purge their records. That's where our errors are. So we have to go through every single one and try to figure that out.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
could we ask the sheriff's administration to provide us with a written explanation of our status with the next generation 911? I mean, I'm taking in everything I can hear, and my eyes are half closing. And I look at the map that was illustrated in November Wisconsin Counties Association magazine, and I see 60 counties that are up to snuff with the agreement. And
So again, the
I
agreement is.
know with all of the money and all of the experience I have participated in from the time when Outagamie and Brown and Winnebago County were in a consortium to share the radio services to the time that Brown left and just left Outagamie and Winnebago to the time that Outagamie set up their own system. It sounds or it appears that we got stuck holding the crumbs that were left of this consortium. And it has, from published information, left us with a deficit. Now, this is a deficit that we ought not to have to wait 5 years to correct, because with the county executive's desire for priority budgeting, this is probably something that we should get up to date, so that the folks in Nepeuskin and Wolf River counties are going to get decent service. I don't fully understand what the sheriff and Captain Gola has shared with us, but I think we should have a written explanation and then go forward with constructing a pathway to reduce these deficits in far less than 5 years.
So I absolutely agree with you that we really should have documentation here, because I believe that we're going to get a lot of questions on this going forward.
Sure.
So I think that would be great to have some sort of report, if you will, on that, just stating what you've stated in a written form. Though I do want to say, even the article says the county has signed a participation agreement. I believe, from what I understand, there's a difference between an agreement that you're going to participate in the program and actually delivering upon the metrics of the program. And I think that's where we can tease that out in some sort of document that helps us understand that, where we stand and where others stand. I think that's a very appropriate thing to ask for. And then what this body can do to help facilitate a resolution, I think all of us.
Give them some money to get us out of the deficit.
Yeah.
So the document will have quite a bit of GIS data.
Yes.
GIS speak. They were actually deciding whether or not they should come to this meeting or not, because this is all their side of the house. So I apologize, but we'll have quite a bit of GIS data in it.
That's what we're asking for. And if we have questions, we are not shy.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Yes, right? Yes.
I just want one little piece I wanted to add to that participation agreement, this parameters, however it is that they were hoping that people would sign on to it before 2029. So it's existed for, I think, 6 or 7 months. So we'll get there. We are going to get there. We're not abandoning it. It's just when you look at the map, it looks really cool. It's very deceiving. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Right, and I think even to Supervisor Eisen's point is, if nothing else, just having a clear path forward. We may say it's going to take us a few years, hopefully not 5, but let's put a plan forward so we have an endpoint that we can work towards. I think that's a very prudent thing to put in place, especially when we're talking about critical 911.
Do you have any other questions?
Any other questions? No.
Nope. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
Paul? Sure, was that it?
That's it. Unless you've got questions of me, certainly.
Any questions? We're going to talk capital next time.
Yes.
All right, looking forward to it.
I actually have a question.
Oh,
Cheryl, I have one quick question for you. I know you want to get out of here. How many fatal overdoses are we sitting at?
30 confirmed, 7 pending. 41 from last year.
We're gonna flow by that.
thank you.
Cheryl, can I just ask your opinion?
Oh,
I don't.
sorry.
A lot of, those numbers bother me. I have heard that countrywide fentanyl overdoses now exceed 300 a day. I don't know what to believe coming out of mainstream media. Based on your numbers, is that really accurate?
300 a day.
300 a day, that's nationally.
I would, That seems low, to be honest.
Seems
with you.
low?
Yeah.
And I'd say about 75% or better have fentanyl in the product in their toxicology.
Many are saved by first responders with Narcan, or they're saved by fellow users. So we don't even know about those.
how do we compare to like a larger population, like Milwaukee County or a Dane County or Brown County? Do you know where they're at?
I don't, but their population is so much larger than
Right.
ours. So I can say that comparative to Outagamie County, we're much higher for some reason, and I don't understand that. Last year too, we were quite a bit higher than them in the fatality end of things.
Is it a demographic thing
Shared.
with the younger college students? Or is it, it's not driving that?
Our youngest is 16, our oldest is 68, 69, just had a 6. So I mean,
Okay, so it's not that like college students are.
no, I'd say majority are probably between the age range of late 20s to 50.
Thank you. I did not mean to put you on the spot. Thank you.
Great.
Sorry to keep you short off. Thank you.
Last question, that was. All right, we're gonna close item 11. And we're going to open up item 12. And it says discussion, possible vote. This is actually just a discussion. And typically, as I've mentioned before, how I like to do these things is bring it up to the committee, see what the committee has to say, and then we can decide if it's something that's we would want to entertain. Let me give you a little bit of, since this is a discussion, give you a little bit of background. This, at least when it came to me, wasn't about a person. And I don't know what their motivations are. I really don't. But it was, the original was, what can we do to increase participation within the community of the board? And the other was, hey, we should just start axing things out that just add time. I mean, I've had all these people come to me and say, hey, listen, we could save some time if we didn't do this or that. And then we've had other people say, you know, boy, it'd be great if we could find ways to interject the community within the board, within the board meetings when appropriate. So one of the questions that I wanted to pose to this group, and it may not be a resolution, it may just be something that we as a committee recommend. We can do that, right? We can recommend that the chair does something or consider something. Winnebago County has 8 chaplains.
Well, more than that. I
At least. We have a bunch.
We have a bunch.
We have a bunch. We have a bunch of Winnebago County chaplains. Did you know that we had Winnebago County chaplains? You did? I did not know. And so the question was, should we recommend that one of the, on a rotating basis, one of the Winnebago County chaplains do the opening prayer? And I
have a
said,
question, Mr. Chairman.
yes.
Who's presenting these ideas? Is this something that?
That people have asked me, multiple people have asked me, and I said, I don't know.
Has any ministerial association
No,
come forward and asked that they present?
no,
Has any minister come forward
no,
and asked that he?
no, it
have the
was,
courtesy?
it actually,
I think you are dealing with a solution, looking for a problem.
no, what I'm looking,
We have had a lay member of the Board of Supervisors provide the invocation for the 16 years that I have been on the board, and probably for the 34 years that Supervisor Albrecht has been on the board, and even longer. And you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
well, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we should constantly look at what we do and ask what's best for our community and for the administration of the county. We shouldn't just rest on the laurels. In fact, I would say if it's not broke, we should make sure that this is the best way of doing it. And why I wanted to have this discussion. Yes.
So I would like to kind of comment on a number of things with this. I think this is a question of a specific person versus a specific idea. I like having prayer at the county board meeting. I'm a practicing Catholic. I think it is a good thing to have. I know other people have very different faiths on this board than I do and different worldviews, and that is completely fine. What I would like to say, what I would like to suggest is have different members of the board at a specific fixed timeframes, maybe once every quarter, maybe once every 6 months, have that change to somebody who's willing to also do this. I think what I've heard is that other people would also like to take up saying the prayer. They're, I think, asking what uniquely qualifies one person to do it outside of somebody else, other than the fact that the other person volunteered to do that. And this isn't a slight against the person who currently does it. I think what people are perhaps looking for is, for lack of a better term, some variety. And to have other people go ahead and do it at the behest of the chair. They can go up to the chair and say, hey, I'd like to do the invocation assignment for the next 3 months. Could I do that? Instead of having one specific consistent item there. And I think what I would just like to advocate for is variety. I'd like to keep it there. I think it's a good thing to have. But if other people like to get involved, I think that's kind of the spirit of the discussion here, instead of just, axing it or going after one person specifically. I think it's more about saying, can we spread things around? I know it would be very difficult for you, Chairman Egan, to consistently try to find a certain chapel if they're available on this day to go ahead and do this and, go out to the community and see if other chaplains are available. I think keeping it within the board is a good idea, but kind of spreading it around the board. That's just my opinion on the matter.
Oh,
How are the prayers presented? Does the chairman provide the prayer to
yes, please.
the presenter?
I do not. Person that is saying it, whomever it may be, that'll be their own prayer. The one that was saying it before, this one that is saying it now, how should I say nice? She did a decent job, but like she'd say at the end of it, like at Christmas time, we were talking before, she'd say, Merry Christmas, Amen. I mean, I will say this much, and I'm not sticking up for Karen Powers whatsoever, but her prayer is very all around. Don't anything on anybody. She does not. I don't even know if you know what religion she is or not, or anything. It's very all around for everybody. It's not really preaching or saying telling anything about that. I got the idea because I was called, if you want to know about why I thought that it possibly might be Supervisor Powers, is because I was called and she shouldn't be it. And I think you all know why maybe it should have been it. And I don't know if you want me to go into it, but I can go into it if you want me to know why. And so, there was only a handful, I won't even say a handful, maybe 3 or 4 that did it, that come to me and said, well, she shouldn't be it. Well, I don't believe that. My job is to go ahead and ones that are doing something wrong, as far as the county board, it's my job to go ahead and reprimand them or whatever. And I did talk to her. I did talk along with corporate counsel. We had a big meeting on it right in my office there. It wasn't just her at that one meeting where it all happened. I just want you to remember that while we're talking about things. I also talked to the other one that got involved in it. I also talked to the chairman of that. He said, you could have just put a halt to all that by asking for a recess or whatever. Just it wouldn't have had to go that far. So, but there was a lot that went on in that meeting. But I just hope that whatever you decide or recommend, that you don't think of that. And if you hear of any of these other supervisors saying that, you can tell them right out that I'm not for that. And if that's what they want to do, is possibly go have different ones say it. I can ask different ones, but I have had no one come up to me and say, I want to say the prayers. And if somebody wants to,
I think he's safe.
I mean, look, I'm happy to take on the responsibility if people want to.
Sure. Why don't you recommend a rotation among the supervisors? Start with 36 and go backwards.
Yeah.
And Supervisor 36 will be given the option to present the prayer at the next meeting. Not this next meeting,
Right.
but the subsequent next meeting.
Right.
And then 35, then 34, or you can go from 1, 2, 3 that way.
Right. And just one time. And that's why I want to make it very clear that I don't want to talk about people. And why the way I posed the question was, what else could we do to involve the community or other supervisors? I think it's just creating a more inclusive environment that way. Yes, Supervisor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's funny that you brought up regarding asking to lead, because I was tempted to do it on the beginning of the budget session on October 31st. Simply because that's a holiday for some people, a religious holiday for some people. And for those that are specifically non-Christian. And, we definitely do, I think all of us pretty much support the idea of free speech as well as freedom of religion, or simply the freedom to not have any religion whatsoever. There are those out there that are just simply atheists. And as and full disclosure for me, and as I'm pretty sure you've known with what I wear here, I'm a member of the Satanic Temple. And so I let the prayer slide, because it really is just a 15 seconds to 30 seconds worth of time. I get it. Some people want to have that little invocation before they begin. It's okay. I'm not very militant over that. But I think at the same time, we have to realize that there are people that practice other religions other than Christianity, or just simply not practice at all. And we have to be respectful of that. I think we just have to realize that we don't want to put preferential treatment over one specific thing. I'm not necessarily sure how to approach that in regards to this. I just want to throw my 2 cents in.
I'm just curious, what do you think of Supervisor Eisen's recommendation of just having it
Like a rotation?
like a rotation? I'm just curious.
Well, I think, I mean, I think that would be interesting in the sense that, if with each supervisor, they may follow a different religion, and maybe they can simply be, it's just really a matter of respect, I think, and you can ask that question of, would you like to? And if they decline, maybe say, well, if is there someone that you would like to cede that your slot to? Or perhaps maybe you just want to skip it altogether. And if that's the case, obviously it's up to the chair, but the chair could say, okay, that person decides not to have an invocation, we won't have one. And then simply proceed. So that it is a very interesting idea. Not really quite ready to commit to it yet, but I will.
That's why it's just a discussion.
I'm picking a little bit up on what you're putting down.
Oh, no.
Why don't you just assign it to the vice chair?
Oh, there you go.
Okay, you don't want to have, the chair has enough to say all night.
I can tell you the vice chair won't do it.
Let the vice chair have the responsibility.
No, the responsibility.
Of the invocation.
There you go. We should put that in a rule.
And then, no, we can ask the chair to start that practice with the December meeting, or maybe the January meeting to start a whole new year.
Sure.
To do it that way.
Okay, yeah, let's.
Well, we can put it in the chair's lap and let him bounce it around his vice chair. And if not, then he can have, we can elect a second vice chair whose primary job is to give the invocation.
There you go.
Then the majority of the board will decide who gives the invocation.
Okay. All right, Supervisor Hanson.
I do know that other, I don't know if it's boards, but other meetings that I've seen invocations at, that there are different faiths presented rotating, and with the idea that we have chaplains, because of what I just heard, I'm wondering if it may not be a good idea for individual supervisors, but if they're not a part, is there any indication that these pastors that we have or chaplains that we have or others in the community would not come forward if we were to extend invitation for the March meeting of next year? And then have to.
We don't know. Short answer.
I don't know about putting it off even consistently from what I'm hearing, even consistently to one supervisor or even rotating among the supervisors. That maybe it would be better to do what some others that I've seen that is someone else completely. That's just, I don't know.
Well, okay, sounds good. I just wanted to pose the question and have the discussion and see if there's, you know.
I'll take it all in consideration. I mean, it's very good
Yeah.
consideration.
This is, I think we have a tendency to kind of forget that you have a lot of discretionary authority and that this is a decision for you. And we can suggest things, but ultimately it's in your hands. And for what it's worth, I trust you with the decision to make. So,
Thank you.
Did he say, what's that?
It looks like you're the only one. The chairman kind of looked at you.
No. I was debating if I was gonna make a joke. But I didn't, so we're going to move on. Okay, we're gonna close that item then. And we're going to close item 12, open item 13, which is a discussion on a resolution that Supervisor Defferning wants to bring forward, support the state legislature to limit community supervision and provide clear guidelines on sanctions for non-criminal violations of supervision.
Yes, all right, so I'll start from the beginning. I attended a meeting in Oshkosh at a church in just to talk about issues in regarding both City of Oshkosh and Winnebago County. And this was brought to me, this issue was brought to me from a Winnebago County resident under a very long amount of community supervision. Community supervision is, parole is just a new term for it. And this is something where, looking into it, when I started to look at a little bit more, research more on the subject matter, I was rather alarmed into this. And, so of course, the question was brought to me, well, what can you do about it? And I, responded, well, constitutionally speaking, there isn't really anything that we can do about it. We can, if we can urge the state legislation to work towards reforms. That's something that we can do. That and of course we can bring this over to the Wisconsin Counties Association to look at reforms as well. That's constitutionally speaking, that's the best that we can do. But a couple of things that one of the things that I found very alarming is that first off, Wisconsin's, before the pandemic, of course, this is before the pandemic, things have changed quite a bit since then, but we did see our prison population increase significantly. It almost doubled from 1990 up until about 2019. Obviously, the pandemic did change a lot of things with our prison population and incarceration rate. But the other thing is that Wisconsin, I believe, is third, according to the Department of Corrections, to the length that we provide for community supervision for those that after they serve a sentence, or perhaps that's a substitution for a sentence. So we, the idea, of course, the core idea is that community supervision would be an alternative form of incarceration, that it would actually reduce the amount of those that are incarcerated. But according to the Department of Corrections' own numbers, our Wisconsin's incarceration rate is almost double than that of Minnesota. It's higher than the state of Illinois. It's higher than the state of Michigan. It's higher than all of our neighbors. And it certainly isn't the cheese that we're eating. So it's, there's something there systemic that we have to take a look at in regards to, why do we have such a high incarceration rate compared to our neighbors, but yet we have all of this community supervision. So it turns out, looking into it, looking at some of the numbers, is that a lot of those that are admitted into the Department of Corrections, not necessarily with Winnebago County Jail, but some of it, yes, are those that have violated their community supervision. And that could violating community supervision could be they committed another crime, or that they did not follow guidelines. It could be like maybe not showing up for a UI test and things of that nature, or they violated a rule, otherwise known as crimeless revocation. The conditions of their rules. And oftentimes when it comes to rules, a lot of that stuff is in particular to what their crime is for. And a lot of that makes sense. I mean, let's say, for instance, somebody was soliciting a minor. The rule is they cannot have access to the internet, they cannot have access to email, things like that. Lots of times it makes sense, but sometimes it doesn't make sense. I have talked to someone who works in this is an example that I brought to Marianne Mueller too, is that there was a person who was in Calumet County, had a drug charge, was under community supervision. After under community supervision, he started his own house painting and roofing and siding company, became very successful, was getting a lot of jobs. Invited some of his employees over, and the employees brought some alcohol and they left it in his premises. And the alcohol was a break in that rule. And he was reincarcerated, and he ended up laying off over 30 employees of his company because he was the one that was handling all of the jobs. He was booking everything. He was managing everything. So it kind of goes to show like some the economic impacts in regards to community supervision, and so we have to. We're starting to see some other states taking a look at that and doing some reforms, and taking a look at providing incentives for good behavior, model behavior, and looking at possibly limiting the amount of community supervision that you get. Two states that I can think of, Georgia. Georgia has taken a look at that, but specifically Louisiana. Louisiana did have the highest prison incarceration rate in the United States. They went through several very big reforms, and one of them was taking a look at incentives for community supervision. And after 3 years, if they follow all of the guidelines, then they can be eligible for release of community supervision. They saw their prison population literally cut almost in half. And so with this, I was working up a draft resolution, and I wanted to get everyone's input, and I went to the district attorney to talk to him about it. I did go to the sheriff, and I got his opinion on it, and of course, corporation counsel as well. I'm not, this isn't necessarily a pressing matter. It's not like we have to pass it ASAP, but this does affect Winnebago County in the sense of, and you can see it in the sheriff's report too, just how many of those that have violated probation and parole, and how many are those that are incarcerated here in the jail. And we have the option to not incarcerate them if need be, if it's a state issue. But, we have, as we know, we still have staffing issues here in Winnebago County.
Yes, Supervisor Eisen.
This sounds like an issue that should be addressed to our state representative, Michael Schrock. And this is something that you may want to formalize for yourself and bring it to the legislative committee, which deals with these hypotheticals to the state. Far more than taking up the time of this committee, which has been going for 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Well, maybe not necessarily Schwab, but there is a state assembly person that has been taking a look into that, and that's Evan Goike over in the
Well,
Milwaukee area.
he is on the,
Yeah,
Legislative committee,
what?
legislative committee.
Well, no, isn't he on the,
like judicial public safety of the state.
Yeah,
He's the
yeah,
chairman
he's
of
the
corrections.
main guy. So, we have the resources here in Winnebago County. If we apply it appropriately, and it would seem to me, I know, in my participation on the legislative committee, he was a regular attendee. And if his habits are still the same, that would be a terrific forum to put these ideas forward. And from the legislative committee, they can choose to send the resolution to the county board for other counties to
Right.
sign on to.
And with the, if I were to draft up a resolution, that's exactly what I would do, specifically in regards to also having it go to the Wisconsin Counties Association too, to have them as part of their discussion as well.
Any other guests?
I would suggest that would be a most appropriate path.
Did you have something?
I just know very little about this subject. Could you forward me information so I could read it?
You betcha,
I was
absolutely.
gonna actually ask the same too, but that's it.
Sure. You betcha, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
All right,
So that's all I have.
okay, great, thank you. Yeah, this was news to me, and when I first saw the item, like, what does this even mean? So, thank you. All right, we're gonna close 13, item 13, open up 14. Public comments on not agenda items, but within the jurisdiction of the committee, and I think I'm gonna say no comments. All right. Unless you have any burning desire to speak some more.
Looking at Julie?
All right, we're gonna close 14. The next meeting date is Monday, December 5th at 6 p.m. Same time, same place. And as a reminder, anything that we would decide at that meeting would then be, I suppose, eligible for the December board meeting. Yes.
Yeah, so probably 1:10. This is just kind of a reminder for for this committee as well. And I'm going to be putting it on the agenda. But we definitely should go back to read. I know that a lot of us were just focused on the budget. I was focused on the budget, so it kind of got lost in it. We should get back into committee right sizing for Winnebago County. So I plan on putting that onto the agenda so we can get back to focus on that.
Sounds good. We absolutely should. Yeah. Sounds great. All right. So a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Is that all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All righty. Thank you very much.